America better take a second look at itself before the bombs start falling here.
Hey, I tell you, that last sentence, brother, before the bombs start falling here, one of the reasons I think we have been, most Americans don't know it because, again, if you don't see it, it doesn't exist, right? One of the reasons we continue to be so belligerent around the world, and very few people understand it or know it because, they don't, it's not reported. We are in hundreds of bases across the entire globe. Think about it. We spend, Jack, over 8 times more. Rather, if you go ahead and add up the next 8 countries in the world, and I think it's more now. When I wrote my book, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, at that point, there were, I think, 8 or 9 other countries. If we added up the military budget of those other 9 countries, our one country's military budget would exceed that. I want you guys to hear that because it's true. Think about this. If you add up China, Russia, France, Great Britain, all these other great powers, if you add up their military budget, ours still exceeds all of those combined, not individually. But combined. And that, Jack, tells you something. Imagine if we were using all that cash to build bridges. Imagine if we were using that cash to move water in the areas of America that are flooding into the desert areas. In other words, all these hurricanes that come to the south and the southeast, etc. If we could find a way to create canals ready to move water, imagine the amount of monies, imagine the infrastructure we could have in America if we decided to use money to build and construct instead of using money to destroy. People always say, where do you get the money from? Actually, the money is created by, it's fiat. We create the money. And as long as there is supply and demand, as long as for the work needed, there's a supply and vice versa, it's okay. But imagine if we could use the billions upon billions upon billions that we've spent decade after decade after decade to build, to educate, and all these other things. What a society we would have. But then again, we don't want a very intelligent society. We don't want a society that's actually doing things because it immediately creates a more democratic being. People wanting to say, or people saying, why should I do this for the few? And if you don't know any better, that's what you build. You create structures for the few. I was watching a storyline yesterday. I think MSNBC's Wagner. She went into Michigan. I don't remember the county in Michigan. And there were all these union workers, and the older union workers, I was impressed with the older union workers. They understood that while Donald Trump spoke a lot about infrastructure week and building this and working class, etc., that his policies never did it. These older folks understood that Donald Trump's policies were tax cut for the wealthy that did nothing for the union worker, right? And one of the older guys, not older, but when I say older, I'm talking in their 40s or so, stood up and said, every union worker in here, because they were all union workers, your job and the stability of your job right now, you see that thing you're building in Washtenaw County? That came from the CHIPS Act. You see that thing that's giving you that stability? That came from the CHIPS Act. That came from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And all these union jobs were created by policies that Republicans objected to, voted against, that Democrats supported in order to give work to people. Things that, they would call, why spend there, spend. Of course, giving a tax cut is a reverse form of is a form of spending as well, right? But they don't have a problem spending there. And he stated, and he pointed out. And then the shocking thing was when Wagner went and she asked a younger guy, maybe 30 years old. He said he didn't know enough, but he was leaning Trump. And Wagner didn't press on enough to say, okay, what are the differences in policies that would affect you? Why you would pick Trump over Wagner, over Kamala? And she didn't go the next level to ask the question. She was just being objective, right? In other words, letting the person speak. But if you are a journalist and you are just going to let the person speak, and yes, it's important for you to know why, what they're going to do. But also, if you as a journalist understand that what they're going to do is based on them being ill-informed, misinformed, or disinformed, I think a journalist's job is to point that out. Interestingly, before I came on, and I always say that you always kind of change the show for me, Jack. Interestingly, before I came on, there's an article that Bill Hunt sent me, one of my supporters here at Politics Done Right sent, and the title of the article was "Journalism Professor's Suspension Shows the Hypocrisy of Objectivity." The old style journalism doesn't work anymore because that journalism doesn't necessarily lie, but it generally lies by omission. And it lies by omission because of who controls journalism. If you're watching no matter what station, if you guys know, a lot of clips that I put on air generally comes from CNN or MSNBC. That's the closest that we can get to not journalism that we need today, but journalism that's the best we have in the mainstream. Notice what I didn't say they were like great. I said it was the best we have in the mainstream, that you can get a few chips of truth with not too much lying by omission. So what happens a lot of times is I would take a story, let's say by Ali Velshi or Rachel Maddow or one of these guys, and then expand on that story, the part that maybe they can't say, right? Because after all, they're being funded by Jordan, the kidney drug, or they're being funded by Farxiga, the kidney drug, or some other drug. So they can't come out and say, well, our drug market is a rigged market. We, the people of the United States, create the research for the drugs, create the intellect for the drug, create the environment where a person educated by the public system can go work for a private company, create a drug, and then they sock it to us again after we've given them the raw material to create that drug. You see, you won't hear it that way on MSNBC, CNN, and definitely not Fox News or all the others. But that's the case. When I start the program every morning, I talk about we are getting our message through the internet, formerly known as the ARPANET. One of the modals that I'm trying to keep in the thinking process is that how much all of us are responsible for our own economy, for the economy of the United States, for the economy of the world. Because too often we give kudos, we acquiesce to those who would have you believe that they have something special that makes this whole institution of America and its economy work, which isn't true. We have always been a collective where some are recognized and others aren't, but where we all depend on each other for this collective to work. This collective called the United States, this collective called this hemisphere, this collective called the entire world. It's all interdependent on everyone. From that kid that is pretty much in slave labor in the areas collecting rare earths from the batteries that we love in our electric cars, to the miners of gold in the middle of Africa that's being enslaved, to the children enslaved to get that gold for us to live a comfortable life, to the pain of the people around the world, to support the type of economic systems in the West that exploits by abstraction. And what do I mean by exploit by abstraction? One of the things why we can keep our heads up high and we can feel like we are so morally correct in the way we've been is because we have an economic system that knows how to abstract our bad doings. In other words, we live a life that we call democracy, not real, but we call it democracy. We can go into that on the Senate later on with one of the articles. But the reality is it? We don't see what's happening overseas so that we can have this comfortable life. We can't see what our corporations do overseas to make sure that we have this beautiful, comfortable, air-conditioned life, many of us. But until we do that, we wouldn't be that free, moral country that we think we are. It's something we should take a look at.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.